Roe v. Wade gave constitutional cover to the elective killing of unborn children in America, period. You think about the implications of that on the economy. We're all struggling here to cover the bases of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all the rest. If we had all those able-bodied workers in the economy, we wouldn't be going upside down and toppling over like this. Listen,
the gentleman
I will not yield. I will not. Roe was a terrible corruption of America's constitutional jurisprudence.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's bonus episode where I'm going to be answering questions from our subscribers at the Democracy Defender level or higher on Patreon. If you want to submit your questions and join the conversation, just sign up at patreon.com/gaslit. And if you didn't hear your question answered in this week's episode, look out for it in next week's bonus. As you can imagine, this month has been a monster. People are in real grief. And so the questions that are flooding in are a lot around the war. There are questions around Trump and Epstein and Hugh Hefner and other run-of-the-mill corruption and transnational crime stories that we'll get to in next week's episode. But right now, a lot of the bonus questions that the show's received are about the war and especially Iran and what is Iran trying to do here. So we're going to go into all of that. But first, a huge congratulations to Jim Jordan, who after several tries is finally Speaker of the House. As you saw, this hardcore right-wing evangelical from Louisiana, a state that consistently ranks worst in some of all the quality of life indexes from education to healthcare and so on. That whole saying, selling someone down the river, that's about Louisiana. It was about selling slaves down the Mississippi River to the hellscape of New Orleans, where there was a massive slave market, and it was the worst of the worst. It was just a genocidal dead end for enslaved people during the centuries of slavery that built the United States. And I'm saying all this because I'm fresh off of the Gaslit Nation phone bank last night for Virginia, and one of the callers, one of the people that I got on the line while phone banking, grilled me about critical race theory, and the gentleman was treated to an impromptu Gaslit Nation episode about American history, and I actually won him over, and that is why we phone bank. And so that just brought to mind that Mike Johnson's from Louisiana, the state that was so hellish for enslaved people that it gave rise to the saying, selling someone down the river, which is another way of saying betrayal. So Mike Johnson is a longtime Jim Jordan protege. This is very significant that we all understand this because I'm hearing a lot of normalization of a Mike Johnson, a lot of false hope that he might be a normie when nothing could be further from the truth. Mike Johnson, who you heard in the opening clip, answers to Jim Jordan, who has mentored him for a very long time now. And Jim Jordan, of course, answers to Donald Trump. The House Speaker is therefore a Russian nesting doll of fascism. So that makes a Donald Trump proxy third in line to the presidency. In a way, Trump's big lie won, given how close he suddenly is to the White House. At a time when the Secret Service is full of MAGA hardliners, as Biden's dog commander keeps trying to warn us, as does a brilliant book by the Washington Post reporter Carol Leonnig, Zero Fail, The Rise and Fall of the Secret Service. Given that we're in a time of escalating war and terrorism, we need all the powers that be to protect Biden and Harris. Put them in a lockbox because a Trump proxy is now third in line for the White House. This is Trump's latest coup. So why did Jim Jordan fail several times? Why did he have to rely on his protege? Why the relatively unknown Mike Johnson, who has never led a powerful committee? He came out of nowhere. Even though this guy is in the shadows, he is the driving architect of the big lie, which has led to several indictments and now convictions. Why him, this Clark Kent-looking guy? Because Jim Jordan is an asshole, and even his fellow Klansmen in Congress cannot stand him. In true wannabe autocrat fashion, Jordan literally threatened people's lives, threatened the lives of their families. And that's a reminder that the Republican Party is very much aligned with Russia, not just because of the easy, dirty, dark Russian money that goes to candidates like George Santos, Russian-linked money and so on, but also because the Republicans want to rule like Putin. Because corruption, threatening people, those mafia tactics are so much easier in their minds than having to actually govern and build things. So Jordan fell on his face there because even his colleagues were like, we don't want to be stuck under a wannabe dictator in Congress. And what this story also points out is the myth of the moderate Republican. There is no such thing as a moderate Republican in Congress, and yet the DC media keeps falling for it. All of these, the story kept going on that, the Republicans are rejecting MAGA, rejecting Jordan. And no, they all fell in line behind MAGA. And even Matt Gaetz is celebrating. He was on Steve Bannon's podcast saying MAGA is ascendant and nicknaming Mike Johnson MAGA Mike Johnson. So Matt Gaetz won. And remember, like the whole point of this shutdown was to block aid for Ukraine. And it's true that Mike Johnson is on record saying that Ukraine must prevail, but there must be some oversight. There must be oversight on all the funding Ukraine gets. But the reality is he's in service to Trump. And so if Trump needs to shut down Ukraine funding to get all the money and support he needs from Putin, he will do that. So I'm not confident that Ukraine is going to get the funding that it needs. Luckily, America has been here before. FDR dealt with these same assholes, the isolationist Republicans that made up most of Congress back in the late 1930s and early 1940s. FDR dealt with this same dynamic. And so he found all these creative ways around it, including Lend-Lease, where we give stuff, where FDR gave American military might, ships and things and weapons to the British when they were getting blitzkrieged by the Nazis. And so Biden is really building off of FDR's legacy through Lend-Lease and other strategies to go around the deadlock, the gridlock, deliberately engineered by the Russian-aligned MAGA fascists in Congress. And so that does give hope. Obviously, there's limitations to that executive power. And now that there's a war in Israel, with Israel and Hamas, it's going to be interesting to see if that creates any sort of limitations on aid that was set aside for Ukraine now going to Israel. We've already seen some examples of that being reported in the press. So that's where things are now. I am optimistic that the Democratic Global Alliance will continue to rally and that they're prepared for a Congress that is further gridlocked by Trump with his proxy as speaker now. And I think the Global Alliance is extremely determined with or without the U.S. And so I'm confident that Ukraine will get what it needs from other NATO partners just to help during this difficult time. And but for the rest of us, I would expect another looming government shutdown given the intentional chaos in the House. It's meant to hurt America from within and further divide us and further weaken us. That's what they're doing. They're literally an instrument of a hostile foreign regime, and they're dark money libertarian backers who want to drown government in bathtub. That's where we are. It's the autocrats trying to take over our democracy. We all know that by now. So now let's get to some questions. The first question is from Robin. My question is whether Netanyahu's intelligence system is really as bad as all that, or did he allow the Hamas planning to slip through with plausible deniability in order to create a Pearl Harbor moment? Netanyahu had a massive amount of warnings from Israel's own security forces, and also from the U.S., and the Egyptians, and even analysts at the time were writing for a long time saying that Netanyahu was weakening Israel, and that made Israel increasingly vulnerable to Hamas and other enemies. So, yeah, the writing was on the wall, and he allowed it to happen likely because he wants his war to stay in power. He wants his genocide of Palestinians, which is happening in plain sight and being documented by several humanitarian organizations in order to please the genocidal base that brought him to power and helped him cling to power. So that's been documented in the show notes of the recent episodes. So, yeah, and I think and you have a labor leader and others in Israel calling for Netanyahu's ouster now, which is the best thing that could happen, because my big concern is that some larger bomb is going to go off in this war. Something even worse is going to happen under Netanyahu's watch, that's going to ultimately force him out because of the chaos, the instability, the infighting that he's still engineering inside Israel's government. Israel remains weak and vulnerable under Netanyahu. And so it's just a matter of time before something else goes off in a very big, devastating way that finally forces his ouster in the middle of this war. And that I'm really concerned that that's where we are headed. So that's why he has to go now.